African athletes are making their mark in field arenas and courts around the world. As we've covered many times on this show, there are currently 3 African-born Ultimate Fighting Championship title holders. That includes Nigerian-born fighters Kamaru Usman, Israel Adesanya, as well as Cameroonian Francis Ngannou. And you'll remember these very famous images from France's 2018 World Cup Championship victory. At least 15 of the team's players boast African roots. Kenyan and Ethiopian athletes have long dominated marathon running events, and increasingly, as a result, major sports organizations are taking notice. The NBA's new 12-team Basketball Africa League just debuted last month in Rwanda, and a UFC match could happen, according to Dana White, in Africa by the end of next year. But many African athletes have higher hurdles to jump over at home than their counterparts. Many African countries have admitted to lacking the financial framework and the proper facilities to adequately train these promising athletes. And grooming sports stars tend to take a back seat to dealing with more pressing issues like political unrest, conflict, and humanitarian crisis. Time now for the exchange and a focus on the Nigerian athletes headed to this year's Olympic Games. I spoke with Sunday Dare, Nigeria's Minister for Youth and Sports Development, and I pressed him on what Nigeria is doing to make sure that athletes are prepared to perform. Take a listen. It's interesting because we all remember 1996 for Nigeria in the Olympics. That was a banner year. Nigeria did very well, coming home with 2 gold medals. In your mind, was that a fluke? Was that a coincidence? Was that down to the athletes' talents themselves? Or were the athletes back then set up for success in a way that they weren't in subsequent years?
Well, first, let me say it wasn't a fluke, because we have seen over time, even after 1996 and later, we've seen the number of our talents in different sporting activities increase. But like you noted earlier, the challenge of sporting infrastructure, the challenge of funding has been constantly there. Sports in this country before was just mere recreation. It's only recently under President Honourable Buhari that we had sports reclassified from recreation to business. That is, sports built in with a business model. And I think that we proceeded in that direction. But I want to assure you that the Tokyo 2020 Olympics is going to be different, because we have seen through public-private partnership, our athletes being adopted and being supported, both financially, their welfare being taken care of. And that's why we have excellent performances.
Clearly, there is so much talent in Nigeria, so much talent in Africa as a whole. But is the issue of sports and promoting sports something that President Buhari genuinely cares about, especially given that there are more, how should I say it, pressing issues that the country is facing right now, dealing with insecurity, banditry, kidnapping? Those things, I imagine, are much higher on his list of priorities than, say, for example, sports. What do you say to that?
Absolutely. For every president, as the chief security officer of any country, constantly on your priority list must be security, banditry. And we see this government doing all it can to make sure that this is nipped in the bud. But importantly, I can tell you, I've been Minister of Youth and Sports for this great country for about 18 months now. And I can tell you that I've received constant attention from Mr. President. Like I said, sport is now business in this country. We receive massive support, and in another 60 days or so or less, we will be providing this country with a new sports industry policy, with a business model built around our sports. We've seen this government support sports development across the length and breadth of this country. There's a plan. Just last week, he asked for a 10-year football master plan. So I agree. Football is important. Sports is important. It's part of the issues on the agenda of Mr. President. But of course, not at par with the security issues which this country is dealing with.
Well, there's a link, actually, and this is interesting because obviously there's a huge problem with youth unemployment in Nigeria, especially in the northern part of the country. What is the role of sports, do you think, in empowering young people, especially in the northern part of the country?
An excellent question. Excellent question. This country, has 65% of our youth population is below 25. That's a bulge that we are confronted with. but also where concerted efforts have been made. I can tell you off the cuff that 61% of those involved in sports in this country are the youth. And what we have seen is an attempt by government to build sporting infrastructure so that our youth can have either community sporting centers, mini stadium, township stadium, where they can go and just express themselves, show their talent, get trained. So the unemployment spreads around the country, but it's engaging our youth, especially in the north and other parts of the country.
I want to dig deeper on the sort of private sector involvement in sports in Nigeria. Obviously, in the US, where I'm based, sports is huge business. Everything from merchandise to ticket sales, concessions, but most importantly, TV rights. That is why the athletes in this country are extremely wealthy. Just explain to us where we are in terms of, I know you talked about President Buhari wanting a concrete plan, but where are we in private sector involvement in sports in Nigeria?
Well, my response would be this. When I became Minister of Youth and Sports Development, we developed, with the approval of Mr. President, a public-private partnership model, which we called the Adopt an Athlete, in which home-based athletes and foreign-based athletes are adopted by the private sector. They are supported financially for their training, for their medicals, for coaching, for nutritionists, for travels that they have to do. Now, we've succeeded so far in getting almost 18 to 20 of our athletes who are Olympic-bound adopted. We also started a talent hunt program. That talent hunt program seeks for talent, sporting talents across the country. We've had so many private organizations from the organized private sector come forward to adopt some of these athletes, some of them 10 years old, 12 years old, 14 years old. So we've seen a recent spike in the interest of the organized private sector in sports development in this country. Now, we believe that the most important thing for us is the policy to drive this.
Final question. Nigeria has about 52 athletes going to the Olympics in about 9 different games. Tokyo right now is going through another wave of this pandemic, a 4th wave in terms of COVID. How concerned are you, and what sort of assurances have you been given in terms of making sure the Nigerian athletes who go to Tokyo are kept safe?
Thank you very much. I think what we have done, there's the Nigerian Olympic Committee. Every country has an Olympic committee. This ministry and the federal government has worked closely with them, working with the IOC, working with the NOC, but also working with the Japanese government through the ambassador in this country. We do know that there's an IOC guidelines and playbook on COVID-19, and we are keyed onto that. Most importantly, we're looking at vaccination of our athletes. We're also looking at the 14-day line to get the COVID-19 test before Tokyo opens for the Olympics. We are confident that all our athletes
have been vaccinated. How many athletes have been vaccinated out of the 52?
Yeah, I think about all of them have taken the first shot of their vaccination. We believe that in another five others will take. But you also know that vaccination is an option. The IOC has said is an option. But we intend to make sure that all of them get the 2 shots necessary that they need to complete their vaccination. And we've received massive support from the Presidential Task Force.
All right. Sunday Dare, thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you.